The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor flickered softly as Richard Hayes, a 42-year-old self-made millionaire, strode briskly past the nursing station. He wasn't supposed to be there for anything dramatic, at least not in his mind. He had come to visit an old business partner who had undergone surgery, a simple courtesy visit to check in, shake a hand, and maybe exchange some pleasantries. His life, after all, had become one carefully calculated transaction after another, measured in numbers and contracts, shielded by money and power. He never imagined that fate had laid a trap for him within those sterile white walls. Richard wasn't just any man. His name carried weight in the financial world. Tall, with salt and pepper hair cropped neatly at the sides, he exuded a blend of confidence and control that came naturally to men who had wrestled the world into giving them everything they demanded. Yet beneath the polished exterior, there lived scars that money couldn't heal, scars tied to the one woman he thought he had shut out of his life forever. His ex-wife, Emily. Emily had once been the center of his universe, back when neither of them had wealth or status. They met when he was still struggling to start his first company, and she was a kind-hearted schoolteacher with bright hazel eyes and a laugh that could warm even the coldest evening. Their love had been intense, passionate, and deeply genuine, but it also crumbled under the crushing weight of Richard's obsession with success. Nights spent at the office, broken promises, and the creeping arrogance that came with money had left Emily feeling abandoned. The divorce had been bitter, not because of scandal or betrayal, but because of two stubborn hearts unwilling to bend. And when Emily walked away, she walked away for good, refusing his wealth, his name, and even the sprawling house that had once been their shared dream. Richard's mind was not on her that evening as he entered the ward. He carried a bouquet of carefully chosen white lilies for a business partner, symbolic of respect and health. But as he turned a corner and pushed open a door, he froze mid-step, his pulse quickened. The bouquet slipped slightly from his grip, petals brushing the floor, as his sharp grey eyes locked onto a sight that turned his carefully ordered world upside down. There, sitting on the hospital bed in a pale blue gown, was Emily. Her hazel eyes, wide with surprise, locked onto his. And beside her, no, not beside her, but with her, were two small boys, twins no older than 6, their identical brown curls and dimpled cheeks catching the light as they clung to their mother's arms. For a moment the sterile room melted away. He saw only Emily, radiant even in her hospital gown, and the boys who shared unmistakable traces of his own features. The strong jawline, the piercing gaze, miniature reflections of himself staring back with innocent curiosity. His heart pounded violently, as though demanding answers his mind wasn't ready to face. Richard's lips parted, but no words came out. Emily looked equally shaken, her composure cracking as she struggled to find an explanation. "Richard?" she whispered, her voice catching half a plea, half a defense. He took a step inside, slowly closing the door behind him. The boys watched with wide eyes, unaware of the storm brewing in that small room. "Emily, who are they?" His voice was low, almost trembling, a stark contrast to the commanding tone that usually carried through boardrooms. Emily swallowed hard, gathering the twins closer. "These are my sons," she replied, though her voice faltered under the weight of his stare. "Your sons," he repeated, his gaze darting between the children and her. His mind raced, pieces of an impossible puzzle falling into place. The timelines, the separation. The fact that she had vanished from his world so suddenly, refusing to speak to him after the divorce. "Emily, are they?" He couldn't finish the question. His chest tightened. Emily's eyes glistened as she looked down at the boys, brushing a curl from one child's forehead.
"Yes,"
she said softly, finally meeting his gaze. "They're yours." The words hit him like a thunderclap. For a man who prided himself on being prepared for anything, Richard felt stripped of every ounce of control. His hands shook as he set the bouquet down on a chair, his mind torn between rage, heartbreak, and an odd flicker of joy he couldn't suppress. 2 sons. 2 living, breathing pieces of himself, hidden from him all these years. The twins tilted their heads curiously, sensing the tension. One of them, braver than the other, spoke up in a small voice. "Mummy, who is he?" Emily hesitated, her lips trembling, before finally whispering, He's your father." The word hung in the air like a sacred secret finally unleashed. The boys' eyes widened, darting between their mother and the tall stranger who now seemed both terrifying and familiar. Richard's breath caught. For the first time in years, tears threatened to break through his carefully constructed armor. He took a step closer, kneeling slightly to bring himself eye level with them. "My sons," he murmured, his voice breaking. Emily shifted uncomfortably, torn between protecting them and allowing this reunion. She had left him for reasons she still believed were right. She hadn't wanted their children growing up in the shadow of his ruthless ambition, hadn't wanted them raised by a man who worshipped money more than family. But looking at him now, vulnerable and raw, she questioned everything. "Why, Emily?" Richard's voice hardened suddenly, though not with anger alone. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her shoulders tensed. "Because you weren't ready," she shot back, her voice laced with quiet pain. "You were drowning in your empire, Richard. You would have seen them as distractions, burdens to your empire building. I couldn't let them grow up feeling unwanted." His jaw clenched. The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely untrue. He had been consumed by success back then, blind to everything else. But now, standing here, seeing what he had lost, the enormity of her decision crashed over him. 6 years stolen from him. First steps he hadn't witnessed. First words he hadn't heard. Birthdays, scraped knees, bedtime stories, all gone. "Do you even realize what you took from me?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "My right to know them, to raise them. And what would you have given them, Richard?" Emily cut in sharply. "A father who was never home. A man whose heart beat only for his bank accounts. You think money is all they needed." He fell silent, her words like daggers, but the look in his eyes betrayed his turmoil. The boys were watching, sensing more than understanding, their innocence caught in the crossfire of long, buried wounds. One of them tugged at Emily's sleeve. "Mummy, is he going to stay?" The simple question shattered the silence. Richard's heart lurched. In that moment, he didn't care about accusations or past mistakes. All he wanted was to say yes, to promise he would never leave them again. But Emily's wary gaze held him back. She wasn't ready to forgive, and trust wasn't something money could buy. "I don't know," she whispered softly to the boys, though her eyes remained fixed on Richard. He straightened slowly, his mind swirling. This chance encounter was no accident. Fate had dragged him into this room for a reason, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. "Then I'll make sure you do know," he said firmly, his voice steadying. "I'm not walking out of their lives again, Emily. Not now. Not ever." The room fell into heavy silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of a machine down the hall. Emily looked away, torn between the fierce protectiveness of a mother and the undeniable truth that her children deserved to know their father. Richard, meanwhile, stood tall, not as the untouchable millionaire he had become, but as a man stripped bare, confronting the most important battle of his life. A battle not for power or wealth, but for love, forgiveness, and the family he never knew he had. Outside the window, the evening sun cast long shadows across the sterile hospital floor, painting the scene in hues of gold and grey. For Richard, everything had changed. The business partner he came to visit no longer mattered. Only the 2 boys and the woman who once owned his heart. He had walked into that hospital as a millionaire, but he would leave it as something far more uncertain and far more human. The silence in the hospital room stretched for what felt like an eternity, the kind that seemed to weigh heavily in the air, pressing down on everyone inside. The millionaire, still unable to process the sight of 2 small boys who mirrored his own eyes, shifted his gaze between them and the woman he once called his wife. His ex-wife sat frozen, her hand trembling on the edge of the bed as though she were about to say something, but the words caught in her throat. The boys, innocent and unaware of the storm swirling around them, looked curiously at the tall, well-dressed man standing by the door, their wide eyes shining with a strange recognition, as if instinctively drawn to him. One of them tilted his head and smiled, and in that single smile, the millionaire saw his past, his present, and perhaps even his future collapse into one. He stepped closer, his heart pounding louder with every move, a million questions crashing against each other in his mind, demanding answers he wasn't sure he was ready to hear. She finally broke the silence, her voice weak but carrying years of unspoken pain. You weren't supposed to know. Not like this. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, her words shaking under the weight of truth she had been hiding for years. He clenched his jaw, struggling to control the rising storm inside him. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me walk away thinking it was over when you were carrying this? His voice cracked despite his effort to stay composed. The boys shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but too young to understand its depth. She lowered her head, her fingers gripping the hospital sheet as if it could anchor her in the moment. Because you didn't want me anymore. You made it clear. And when I found out, I thought it was better this way for them, for you. Her voice faltered, but the truth spilled out, every word cutting through him sharper than the last. He sat down heavily on the chair by the bed, his world spinning as he tried to make sense of the years stolen from him. His eyes lingered on the children, his children, whose lives had unfolded in his absence. He thought of the nights he had spent drowning himself in work, chasing wealth and success, never imagining that what truly mattered most was slipping through his fingers. The boys whispered to each other, one tugging the other's sleeve, before one of them bravely asked, "Mummy, who is he?" The question shattered him more than anything else. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His ex-wife closed her eyes, taking a deep breath before answering softly, "He's your father." The boys' eyes widened, surprise flashing across their innocent faces, but almost instantly a light of joy replaced it, as if the missing piece of their lives had suddenly been found. They didn't recoil or question further. They smiled, and for the first time in years, he felt a warmth he thought he had lost forever. But underneath that warmth, bitterness still lurked, clawing at his chest. He turned back to her, his voice low but sharp. "You robbed me of their first steps, their first words. You robbed them of their father." His words made her flinch, but she held his gaze with quiet strength. "And you robbed me of love when you chose your pride over our marriage. Do you think it was easy for me to raise them alone? Do you think I didn't want you by my side?" Her words struck with equal force, peeling back old wounds both had tried to bury. The hospital room became a battlefield of regrets and accusations, the boys watching quietly, sensing the storm without fully understanding its roots. Yet beneath the anger, a truth neither could deny lingered. They had been bound all along, through two lives that bore both their faces and their hearts. As night fell, he remained at the hospital, unable to walk away. The boys, exhausted, drifted off to sleep in their small beds, their soft breathing filling the room. He stood by them, his hand brushing gently over one's hair, marveling at the softness, the fragility, the undeniable connection. His ex-wife watched from the corner, her heart torn between resentment and the undeniable truth of the man standing before her. She whispered softly, her voice almost breaking, "They always asked about you. I told them stories, but I never lied. I told them you weren't here." He turned to her, his eyes finally softening, his pride melting under the weight of years lost. "I don't want stories anymore. I want to be here. For them, for whatever is left of us." Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, years of loneliness and silent battles breaking through. She shook her head slowly, conflicted between hope and fear. "You can't just come back and erase everything. You can't undo the nights I cried alone, the birthdays you missed, the times they asked why they didn't have a dad like other kids." His chest tightened, every word reminding him of what his choices had cost. But he stepped closer, his voice steady yet raw. "No, I can't erase it. But I can make sure their future is different. I can be the father they deserve, even if I can never be the husband you once needed." His eyes lingered on her, the old spark of love flickering faintly, fragile but undeniable. In that quiet hospital room, surrounded by machines beeping softly and the glow of sterile lights, a family once torn apart by pride and silence began to piece itself back together, not perfectly, not easily, but with the faint hope that love, though buried, was not completely lost. She didn't answer right away, but the silence was no longer hostile. It was filled with possibility, fragile and uncertain, but real. And as he sat by the beds of the twin boys, his hand gently holding theirs, he knew that for the first time in years, he had found something worth more than all his millions. The chance to be the father, and perhaps the man, he was always meant to be.